On my way to the Redwood Forest, to Crescent City, I drove through the city of Grants Pass. Alright. I don't really think you have the choice to not drive through Grants Pass on your way. I stopped in some cute little boutique. I stopped in a taqueria and I got a couple tacos, which I had been doing a lot by this point, ever since Allie introduced me to the concept in Chicago. I drove into Crescent City, which hardly deserves to be called a city at all. There was a strip mall or two, some tiny little bungalows, and yes, the ocean was there. Now, I'd been close to the ocean for some time, but I hadn't actually gone to it, put my feet in it, gone to the beach, nothing. So I decided that this would be it. I would go to the beach here. I looked at my map and I followed the streets along until I reached a street that had beachfront access. I parked my car and I walked down a little spiral staircase onto a beach. It was actually really cold in Crescent City. I always had the ignorant East Coast view that all of California was warm. I think of California, I think of sunshine. But that wasn't true. In Crescent City, it was cloudy and it was cold. I drove to the opposite side of the town, scoped out the library, and decided to do some laundry at a laundromat. In the same strip mall was a movie theater. I noticed that Year One was playing in the movie theater next to the laundromat. As a huge Michael Cera fan, I had wanted to see this. So before I proceeded to do my laundry, I purchased a ticket. I also stopped in a grocery store that was also in this plaza and bought a carton of blueberries, movie snacks.
I think that this is challenging. Gathering, it's extremely challenging. You have to find all the fruit with the least amount of breadsheet on it and put it in the basket.
Now, this movie got poor reviews, but I really enjoyed it. And maybe going to see a movie by yourself is one of those lonely things that you do when you're pretty far away from home and you're in a dead, would-be, or once-was tourist town. After the movie, I went and parked my car in the little neighborhood of Bungalows, pulled out my sleeping bag, and went to sleep. The next morning, I got up and went to the library. The library apparently doesn't open until like 11 o'clock or noon, because in California, everything is messed up. Also not opening until later than it should was the post office. I spent a while at the library in Crescent City, using their Wi-Fi, uploading some pictures, checking my email, looking for a place to stay in San Francisco. No luck. They had a little tourist center and I stopped in and talked to a girl, telling her that I didn't want to spend any money, but I wanted to poke around the Redwood Forest. She highlighted me some different roads to drive down, places to check out that wouldn't cost me any money. The roads through the Redwood Forest were windy, as if the roads had been built between the trees instead of knocking trees down. This was the first time, and probably the last time in my entire trip, when I felt a little sad to be alone. I found this tree you could go inside. It wasn't designated or anything. There was just a large hole, and I looked inside and there wasn't anything there, so I walked in. One that is especially magical. You have to see it. So now we are inside a redwood, and the really cool thing is, if you look all the way up, you can see right through the inside. It's gotta be, I don't know, over 50 feet up. It's entirely hollow. And nothing lives in here but tourists. took some different pictures of myself, and I really wished someone was there to share the experience with me. I started heading towards the campground I was to be staying at. I picked a place with beachfront property. I figured that would give me the best of both worlds. I drove down Avenue of the Giants, the Scenic Byways, and I got to see lots of kitschy little uses for redwoods.
Until it will be as
I got to the campground, which I would be staying at for 2 nights. I pitched my little one-person tent and decided that I would need to make a fire. There were signs posted everywhere saying that I wasn't allowed to gather fallen wood. This was a part of the ecosystem and it was to be left there. Now I understand this, but that's not the only reason they're telling me this. They also want me to leave the ecosystem as it is so they can chop down ecosystems somewhere else and charge me $8 a bundle. I don't think so. I got back in my car and took a little drive. I drove slowly looking for downed wood on the side of the road. Outside of the campground, of course, so they couldn't kick me out. I drove until I hit a little store. I bought a $3 bottle of wine and some hot dogs, and maybe something else. On the way back, I stopped outside of a restaurant. Someone had recently cut down a tree. The wood appeared to be red, but the size wasn't so large. I stealthily snuck chunks of it back into my car. This would be my firewood fuel. I went back to the campground and started a fire all by myself. I've never actually done this before. I made this fire using matches and wood found on the side of the road, and a little ingenuity, and no gasoline, and no help. I've always had help, be it another person or some fuel. I cooked hot dogs and tomato soup over the fire. I drank a little wine and went to bed. There was no more light and there wasn't much that I could do. The next day when I got up, it seemed as though it had rained. My sleeping bag felt damp and there were water drops on the inside of my tent. I got out and realized that it hadn't rained. I had just become enveloped in cloud. I decided that this day was for cleaning out my car and reading my book, and just sort of chilling and gathering and organizing. I needed to clean out my car because it was a mess, but I also needed to clean out my car because I couldn't find some things. I couldn't find my favorite little gray hat, and I also couldn't find one of my running sneakers. I took everything out of my car and placed it on the picnic table. By the time I placed everything back in, it was nearly dark out. I had only read a few pages in my book, and I hadn't found my sneaker. Nor had I found my hat. It seemed they were lost somewhere in America. The second morning I woke up and took a walk around some of the nature trails. It sure feels like a waste of beachfront property to have it be so cold and damp and miserable. I had to be out by a certain time, so I did so. I checked out and mapped my route to the vineyards I wanted to stop at on my way to San Francisco. I drove down some more scenic byways, and I even stopped at a place where you could pay a few dollars and drive through a tree. They gave you a free postcard. Navarro Vineyards was a place that was marked as having free wine tastings, and their wine was supposed to be pretty good. The thing they didn't mention is that if you were driving from the Redwood Forest, you had to drive over a mountain. I drove through the towns of Eureka and Ukiah. Eureka you drove straight through. Highway 101 goes right through the town. Ukiah, on the other hand, I got off an exit to go to. If you've ever read any of the Nick Twist novels, Youth in Revolt, you'll know why I stopped there. I wouldn't reach San Francisco before nightfall.